Hi, unruly family. This is my recap for the anime Sasaki and Peeps. If you'd like my recaps, please consider subscribing. The story starts with a man named Sasaki taking out trash, and a little girl who was his neighbor wishes him good morning. Sasaki does the same to her, and he then goes to his workplace by train. In his workplace, one of his juniors asks him to take a look at his settlement report, and after taking a look at it, Sasaki suggests some improvements to him, and he states that he would handle this report for him. Meanwhile, he can work on other stuff, and he states that this calls for the right person for the job. This makes his junior happy, and Sasaki then hears a girl talking about a cat she recently adopted. He gets interested in this, and the girl shows one of her colleagues a cat video. Sasaki takes a peek at the video, and he thinks that the cat is adorable, and he hopes that he could also have a pet of his own. Sasaki's boss then gives him some more work, and Sasaki mentions that this is what his workplace is usually like. He mentions that it's an average-sized company, and their earnings and wages are average. He has been barely scraping by due to this, but he doesn't have the courage to change jobs, and facing the market is a terrifying prospect for him as he has experienced a job drought. This is why having a job where he's needed and getting a sense of contributing to society is fulfilling to him. Afterwards, we see Sasaki's junior inviting him for dinner after work, but Sasaki tells him that he is running low on cash this month. His junior mentions that he can treat Sasaki, but Sasaki takes a rain check, and he asks his junior to invite him some other time. Sasaki then heads to a convenience store after work. He buys dinner there, and he loses the lottery for getting a free item. He returns to his home afterwards, and the little girl from earlier welcomes him back. Sasaki then has dinner at his home while watching some cat videos, and he gets really taken in by them. The scene cuts to Sasaki at a pet store, and he checks out some cats. He notices that they are priced really high, and he thinks that this is the sad part of having a low salary. He thinks that he would like to have a pet dog if he had the money for it, and Sasaki then hears a bird chirping, and its chirp sounds like the words "pick me." Sasaki follows the voice, and he notices a Java sparrow. He thinks that it's cute, and it's only priced 3,000 yen. Sasaki buys it, and he takes it home. He puts the sparrow in its cage, and he thinks that it's really cute. Sasaki thinks that he was lonely with his 40th birthday soon approaching, and this is why he went to the pet shop. Afterwards, Sasaki wonders what he should name the sparrow, and the sparrow mentions that his name is Pichan, and he is an inhabitant of another world and a star sage. Sasaki thinks that this bird sure talks a lot, and he thinks that this might be normal for this species. He then wonders what he should name him, and the bird repeats itself. Sasaki thinks that this bird already has a splendid name.
我が名はピエール・カルロ、異界の徒にして星の賢者。
めっちゃ喋った。はあ、そうか。稀に喋る個体もいるとネットに。ピエール・カルロ。
But nonetheless, he decides to name it Peeps. The bird looks kind of unhappy and angry with his new name, and Sasaki thinks that it's cute even when it's angry. He can't believe that he is communicating normally with a bird, and he thinks that Yamada from the pet shop did say that he could get Peeps to sit in his hand if he manages to get him acclimated to human contact. He thinks that he was determined to make this happen, and he wonders if, aside from this, Jabba sparrows are also good at communicating. Sasaki decides to try talking to the sparrow more to make sure, and he asks him what he would like to have for dinner tonight. The sparrow states that he would like to have Kobe beef shadow bryant, and he explains that a man named Yamada at the shop claimed that it was the best thing to eat. Sasaki can't believe that he is really having a conversation with a bird, and he thinks that Yamada was eating some fine cuts of meat. He asks Peeps if the pellets are not to his liking, and Peeps states that they are not. Sasaki mentions that he also doesn't like lousy food, but he can't afford shadow bryant. He explains that it's an expensive kind of meat, and he apologizes to Peeps for being poor. He asks Peeps if he would like to have some pork ribs instead, and Peeps states that Sasaki should just earn the money if he doesn't have it. Peeps mentions that he was exiled from the other world and received a new life in this form. He has thought about many things since then, and he has arrived at the conclusion that he should just live his life the way he wants. Sasaki thinks that this is true and that it's not worth wasting time trying to fit in with everyone else. Eventually, they all die alone, and it's good to do everything they want to do while they are still alive. He thinks that he can understand being a cooperative slave, and Peeps mentions that to fulfill his goals, he requires the assistance of someone from this world. He mentions that he would like for Sasaki to help him, and if he does, then accumulating riches will be an easy feat for him. Sasaki states that he would do anything for his cute little birdie, and Peeps then uses magic to finalize their contract. He bestows a portion of his power on Sasaki, and he mentions that now they are connected by a path. Peeps then asks Sasaki to open his cage, and Sasaki thinks that he doesn't know what's going on, but he might as well see this through. Sasaki opens the cage, and Peeps sits on his shoulder. This makes Sasaki happy, and Peeps mentions that he can now use his former power by channeling it through Sasaki's body. He states that Sasaki's flesh is quite frail, but it's better than this small bird. Peeps then uses a magic spell to teleport Sasaki into another world, and Sasaki is surprised to see this. Peeps explains that this is the world he used to live in before his reincarnation, and this is the provincial town of Batrium and the kingdom of hers. The scene then cuts to Sasaki at his office, and his junior wonders how Sasaki managed to get here so early. He explains that everyone is late today due to a train delay, and he wonders if Sasaki took an earlier train because he has started a morning routine. Sasaki mentions that this is not the case, and his junior then asks to talk to him alone for a moment. Sasaki agrees, and they go somewhere private. His junior asks Sasaki if he would be interested in going independent with him, and he mentions that he is thinking about a new startup. He states that he will be quitting this job the next month, and having someone like Sasaki experience with him would be great. He states that he could offer Sasaki more than what he is getting here, and Sasaki asks for some time to think this over. He mentions that recently he has gotten busy with his personal life, and his junior wonders if he is starting something new. Sasaki states that he just adopted a pet, and his junior finds this hard to believe. Sasaki thinks that this is what he expected, but he is not lying, and ever since he visited that other world, his life has been changing, and he now has a new goal. Sasaki states that, thanks to Peeps' teleportation, he can avoid getting on packed trains, and the relief from this has made his life more refreshing. Due to this, he was able to nod to Peeps' idea of doing business between the two worlds, and we then see Sasaki buying some items to sell in the other world. He thinks that he would like to trade with upper-class nobles, but it would be difficult to do that from the get-go, so they decided to start by doing business with the town's merchants first. Sasaki then buys the stuff, and he wins a chocolate bar in the lottery. He then returns to his house, and the little girl welcomes him back. Sasaki hears her stomach growl, and he gives her the chocolate bar, saying that he doesn't like chocolate, and that he won this for free. He then heads inside, and he goes to the other world with his wares. He goes to the Harem trading company, and he explains that it's a company run by the nobles that govern this town. Sasaki asks Peeps if he should head into the company with Peeps on his shoulder, and Peeps states that Sasaki can claim him as his familiar. Sasaki then sells the item he brought with him for 400 gold coins, and he states that if he converts it, then it will turn out to be 400 million yen. He mentions that the price of crafted goods is really high in this world, and Mark, the president of the company, asks him where he got these pens and papers. Sasaki mentions that he can't reveal his source, but as compensation, he promises to not sell the pen and paper to any other store. Sasaki then went back and forth between the two worlds to continue his business, and he also tried the unfamiliar local food of the other world. Peeps also gave him lectures on magic. He tried to learn the teleportation spell from Peeps, but the spell was too long, and he decided to take his time learning it as he thought that he should take things slow and steady. The next day, while on a break at his office, Sasaki has some time, and he decides to practice spellcasting. He chants the fire spell, and he manages to invoke it on his first try. This activates the fire alarm, and Sasaki runs away from the scene immediately. The scene then cuts to Sasaki telling Peeps about this over lunch, and Peeps mentions that Sasaki seems to have a high affinity for magic. He thinks that it's impressive that Sasaki managed to succeed on his first try, and after eating, Sasaki thinks that it would be a great idea to start an eatery as well, as they do deal with food a lot. Sasaki then notices a cook being fired from a restaurant. He talks to the cook, and he asks him if he would like to share his story with him. The cook then told his story to Sasaki, and he mentioned that his name is French. Having worked as an apprentice at the restaurant since he was young, his culinary skills had been rapidly growing in recent years. But out of jealousy, his co-workers falsely accused him of stealing the restaurant's money, and his boss fired him. Without listening to his explanation, Sasaki thinks that he doesn't look like a bad guy, and if he has the skills to replicate the food he just ate, then he would be just the guy he is looking for. Sasaki then asks French if he would be interested in opening a new store with him, and he mentions that he would like French to be the store manager. French is surprised at this, and Sasaki then sets up an eatery. After talking it over with Mark, he asks Mark to procure a shop and foodstuffs for him, and together they set up an eatery right on the main road of the town. The scene cuts to Sasaki paying French's wages for the last month, and French is happy to get so much money. He mentions that he will pour his heart and soul into his work, and the scene cuts to Sasaki having lunch with Peeps. Peeps states that opening an eatery wasn't Sasaki's initial plan, and he wonders what this is for. Sasaki mentions that he thought that this would be useful for Peeps when he needed to eat, and he mentions that Chateaubriand is out of the question here, but they might be able to create something with a similar taste. He mentions that he would also like to reduce his expenditures back home by eating here, and Peeps wonders if there aren't any prospects of promotion over there. Sasaki states that there isn't, and his pay hasn't gone up at all in the last 5 years. Sasaki mentions that after this, he practiced magic for several days before going home, and he learned fire, earth, water, and ice shooting magic. But there was no significant progress on the teleportation spell. The scene then cuts to Sasaki buying some hunting equipment, and he mentions that hunting is becoming a new hot thing among the nobles. Peeps states that it's comparable to golf in this world, and Sasaki thinks that Peeps has been studying a lot about this world lately. Peeps mentions that it's all because of the internet, and Sasaki then buys some binoculars and a Swiss Army knife, and he presents them to Mark. Mark buys them both for a high price, and due to this, he also manages to make progress on his initial plan to do business with the nobles. Afterwards, he pays a visit to Viscount Muller, the noble who governs this land, and the Viscount checks the goods discreetly. Seeing this, Sasaki thinks that he can't just bring anything here, and that he should be more particular about his products in the future. Muller then mentions that he has heard that Sasaki is from another continent, and he wonders if these goods are common on his continent or if they are considered special products that are accessible to only a few, like the nobility. Sasaki mentions that only a select few possess these goods, and Muller wonders if this means that Sasaki is a man of high status in his own right. He mentions that he does not wish to engage in one-sided dealings with someone of a status equal to that of a noble, and Sasaki thinks that he has to answer this carefully. He mentions that he is a craftsman, and he drifted to this continent after his ship was wrecked. The goods he bought today are the ones he had with him as well as the ones he recently made. Muller understands, and he mentions that from now on, Sasaki is going to sell his goods to the Herman Trading Company and bring some of them to him as well. He will purchase them with something extra, and from now on, Sasaki is permitted to enter this mansion whenever he wants. He mentions that Sasaki should tell him if he notices anything particular in this town that could benefit his territory, and he could report it to him when he brings his wares. With this, Sasaki gained a connection with the Fuel Lord, and his trades between the two worlds moved smoothly. Sasaki thinks that with his sales skills, learning magic, and managing his restaurant, his relaxing life in another world is taking shape, and he then heads to his office.
Take you